Hello and welcome to the CyberFOX Quickstart. In this video, we're going to help you get started, get set up, and do some basic rules, events, and just understand the mechanics of how to use AutoElevate. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to deploy an agent. And the easiest way to do that, without creating any companies or anything within the system, the easiest way to get everything started is simply to go to the settings, click on download, and it'll download the agent. If you're going to put it on your machine, that's easy. It's not going to do any harm. Or if you want to put it on a test machine and make it easy, just right click and say copy link address and then paste it in a browser on whatever your test machine is going to be, and then go ahead and download the AE setup MSI file. Now, you're also, once you do that part, before you do the install or click to run the installer, copy this to your clipboard just like that. And then what you're going to do is, when you run the installer, you're going to see a form that looks just like this. Paste your license key in here, type in your company name or test, whatever it is you're going to be testing with, put some short name initials in there, and then a location. Now, locations are really just a way of grouping and organizing machines under companies. They could be physical, they could be logical, it's entirely up to you. Once you do that, click install. UAC should come up if UAC is turned on. And you're going to need to grant privilege for this installer in order for everything to go correctly. So if you're an admin on that machine, just click yes. If not, you'll just need to input admin credentials and then click OK, and then the application can install. You won't see anything after the installer. Just keep a quick eye on the mouse and you'll see the little blue mouse wheel go spinning in about 20 seconds or so. Once that's installed, we're going to come back over here. We're going to go to computers, and you're going to see the company that you typed in the form. You're going to see that location, and then you'll see the system that's underneath it. Now, a couple things to be aware of when you're looking at this. So the first thing is you want to make sure that UAC is set properly. And the default setting for Windows is on and dimmed, level 3, level 4. So admin level is 3, user level, meaning standard user, is 4. And then you want the secure desktop, which is on and dimmed or on and maximum. And we have those settings in here, so you can easily change those if you need to. The other thing that you want to be able to see is what privilege level are people operating under. So in my case, this is myself, and I'm operating as a standard user. Now, if I want to see what admins are on the machine, this column right here, and of course you can expand all of these, I can easily come down here and say, who's the admins on this machine? Now, in this area, it's important to note, we have a feature called Remove Admin. And what this feature is going to do is help you to manage and remove local administrators across the organizations and companies that you might be managing. And what that can do, it has the ability to remove individual local admin accounts. It cannot remove any groups. So you can see those two big Azure AD groups denoted by the long string of letters or numbers there. We can't remove those. If you see domain admins in there, can't remove that. You'll still have to take care of those with either GPO or going through Active Directory, whatever the case might be. But if somebody's name is in there, built-in admin, for example, is one that if I wanted to, I could have it removed. If my name was in there, we could have that removed. So that's how remove admin works. And so let's actually go take a look at that in the settings really quick before we go any further. So let's go down right over here to settings. This is the multi-level settings, and underneath global, we're going to expand that. And we want to go down to agent security right there. So expand agent security, and then right here, excluded admin users for remove admin. So in there, I can easily go in and type in. So in this case, mine said something like built-in admin, and I would add that. And then we would ignore that account if you turn the remove admin feature on. And that feature is right here. So if you enable this, and there's a certain maybe emergency local admin account that you do not want deleted, you're going to want to put that right here. So that's an important setting. All right. While we're in the settings, there's another couple important settings to be aware of. The first one is going to be customizing the agent dialogues. And the way that you can do this is just select the pencil, and you can control when the system goes to live mode. You can control the dialogue that's going to come up in front of the end user. And you can customize what that's going to say, even how it's going to look. So I've done some basic HTML, so you can use your basic HTML in here. Your formatting tags, I'm using some basic image tag and some header tags and some style tags to change the colors. It'll preview it for you so you can see exactly what it's going to look like. If you want your logo in there, very simple, image source tag, and then link to wherever your logo might be hosted. A lot of times you can pull one right off your website and usually fit it right in there. So this is how you would customize all of the different things that the agent can talk to the end user about, whether you're approving something or denying something, or you're giving them a timer that's going to show up and allow people to basically send in live requests. What would you want to tell them at that particular step in the process? And we're happy to help out with some of those ideas and suggestions. But this is where you can customize the agent behavior. While you're testing, though, you can probably leave these be. But if you want to tinker around with this, a little bit of HTML goes a long way. The other setting that I recommend is to give yourself a little bit of time while you're testing for those requests to come in and for somebody to be able to answer those. I would suggest moving this maybe up to 5 minutes. Just click the pencil, change that to 300. It should be set at 60 right now. And that way you can have a few more minutes when somebody makes a live request to answer that request, and the agent will respond immediately. While the timer's running, these agents do behave just like an RMM agent. They wake up, they check in, they see if you have anything pending for them, and then they go back to sleep for about 5 minutes. And then the same process just repeats throughout the day. However, when that timer's running, then the system will be checking in consistently, waiting for you to respond while the timer is running. All right, so that's some basic setting stuff. Back to the agent. So let's cover how we want to use the agent, or how do we use the agent. So if you check the agent that you've installed, you'll see the action button lights up. And then there's some different modes and options that are in here. We're going to cover what these things do. We're going to start everything in audit mode. Audit mode is do no harm. So it's not going to bother anything. It's not going to hurt anything. It is simply going to audit UAC events. Basically, that's kind of how you roll this out. So you put it in audit mode for a little bit. Then you collect UAC events, which we're going to log for you. Every event's going to get logged. And then from those events, you're going to decide what you want to turn into a rule. And then once you have a set of rules and a baseline, we're going to move it into live mode. And that's going to allow us to both run the rules. And if there is no rule, because they're going to miss some, then we're going to send a live request in so that somebody can disposition it right away. Because once you take away everybody's admin abilities and they run into UAC, for them, it's a work stoppage. Right? They can't move forward until somebody helps them. And that's what the live mode part of the system really helps to solve that use case, where if they have a request and they need an elevation and I don't have a rule, no problem. I can go ahead and answer that request for them right away, and the system will go ahead and elevate. Policy mode is a rules only mode. So if there's a rule, it will run it. If not, it just brings up the UAC box, and they wouldn't have a way to get past it, right? Unless you've given them like your emergency admin access account or something like that. But that's what policy mode's for. Like, run the rules, do it quietly, no problem. But if there's no rule, it just brings up UAC. It does not send anything to the console. So it'll record the event, but it's not going to notify you. And then the last mode is technician mode. So technician mode is for the engineers, the users in AutoElevate. And the way that you get to this is by selecting a hotkey, Control-Alt-A. Another way to get to this, and I'm going to move over to my cloud PC really quick, is you can do the Control-Alt-A, and when you do that, it's going to bring up a QR code in the screen. You're going to use your AutoElevate mobile app in order to scan this QR code, and that authorizes you as the technician. Now, another way to get to this is if a UAC event comes up and you're in live mode, which most of the systems hopefully will all be in live mode once you get rolled out. When they're in live mode, if you've forgotten or you don't remember the hotkey combo or whatever the case is, when our dialogues are presented, in the bottom right corner, it will say technician mode. So you can click that. It will bring up the QR code, scan that with your AutoElevate Notify app. You can find that in your app store, and then it'll authorize you and you'll be able to be a technician. So what technician mode does, let's go ahead. We're going to put this into technician mode really quick so you can see. Technician mode turns off all of the other modes, and it allows you to be an administrator on the machine without having an admin account. The goal of AutoElevate is the removal of all administrator accounts so that nobody has admin access and they can only elevate through the platform. So this allows you to be an admin. You can run whatever you want. It will turn off any rules, and then you can go ahead and elevate. So you saw the dialogue come up a minute ago. That's what the system looks like when you go to live mode and you make a request. Dialogue comes up and asks, do you want to do this? In technician mode, though, it's going to look a lot different. So we're going to go ahead and run this as an administrator. And instead of asking you, hey, I see you're trying to run this, do you want to do this? We're going to put this sidecar on and allow you to do your elevation. So there is context when it comes to doing elevations, depending on what you need or what the application needs. So in this scenario, watch, we'll do an admin elevation really quick. Now, if we do a who am I, you can see that I am in the context of the administrator. Of course, we gotta type that correct, right? There we go. So I am the AE admin, right? So this is an account that we've installed on the machine. It is not an at-rest admin. It is elevated just in time. So right now I'm in the context of the admin. Now watch what happens when we change from an admin elevation, which you guys might be familiar, like over-the-shoulder admin, like you log in, you type in a username and a password, and whatever they were doing, it works, right? That's an over-the-shoulder admin. That would be considered our admin elevation. But in some situations, you might need to elevate the person who's logged in. Now, I am a standard user on this machine, but watch what happens. I'm going to do a user elevation. Now when we go in and we ask who we are, you can see I'm Bill Morgan. So you can elevate the logged in user when you need to. Think of like editing HKey local machine current user, right? Or something like that. Or I have to get into my scripts folder and I elevate PowerShell. I'm going to want to do that in the context of me. Most everything else, though, is admin. Unless you're connecting to like a map drive, then of course, our AE admin account wouldn't have ability to go to that map drive, but the person who's logged into the computer would. So just some scenarios of when you might want to use admin elevation versus user and how to use technician mode. This one is the most important to understand because it does allow whoever's on this machine to have full admin ability, and the timer that is associated to this is 15 minutes by default. You can change that in the settings if you need to, but by default it's 15 minutes and allows you to have basically full admin access. And the way that you want to do it, as I mentioned, is using that QR code. Because if we're in the admin portal and you just set technician mode from here, it's going to turn on and whoever's sitting at that computer has full admin for 15 minutes, right? So, and when you use the QR code, we're also going to tag the engineer who's scanned it and put their name next to all the elevations so they're going to be tracked. So this is a very important mode, right? So your audit mode, just doing basic audits. Policy mode, rules only, no requests are coming in. Live mode, rules and requests will come in if there is no rule. Technician mode, technicians only, authorized with your QR code. But if you needed to in a pinch, you could give somebody admin for a few minutes simply by setting this from the console. Some other settings to be aware of that you might want to use are your UAC settings. please never use this one. That's not good. You want to use these two right here. Okay, and don't turn it off, of course. So now this will set it to on dimmed, which is secure desktop, and it'll set it to admin level 3, user level 4. This will set it to on and dimmed and admin level 4, user level 4. This is an override, so kind of ignore this now, but you might do this while you're testing. So right now you can see over here that my remove admin privilege is set to off for this particular company, and that's the override that we set. But if I come over to one of these, for example, you will see it says it's on from the global setting. If I wanted to override this one computer, I could come in here and go down to my remove admin and say, maybe I just want to turn this one computer off. And that would remove the override and apply this particular setting. All right. So now let's move on to events. This is your computer stuff and how you read all the different computer data that's out there and what kind of information you can get. You can also sort and move these around, by the way. So all of these are grid views, and so you can create and assign your own grid views. If I want to look at something by operating system, or if I wanted to see if the agent was in different modes, you can add and remove these and by dragging them and dropping them into this particular header. So you can see I had one in technician mode, and then I've got a bunch of folks that are currently in live mode. So it looks like right now that Brittany is in technician mode. And then we can go back to our other grid views. You can save grid views, you can reset them, and then when you save a grid view, they're going to show up in the list for you. Okay, let's move to events. So step 2, events. Okay, now your grid views in a clean bare system, these are going to be empty, and you're probably going to look just like this. So what I want you to do is, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what program you pick. Go to your test machine, find a program that you can either run or install or anything that you can simply right click on it and say run as administrator. When UAC comes up, just click cancel. All we're trying to do here is just capture the event. So for example, I think I've got a program here I could probably run. So if we go to our downloads, I can run this program. It's going to hit UAC. That's all I needed to do. Okay. So that event's going to come in, and let's go take a look. So we go to our events, and I want you to sort this events screen. So it probably looks like this right now. You should see, if you did one or two things in your hitting UAC, you'll see those events come in now, right? So try to do something that's software related. That's really going to help the rule making part of this, which is the next step. So if you can do something like Microsoft Edge, right click run as admin, CyberFOX, Chrome, a program that you might want to install, something that has like a publisher to it, just so when we go to the rule part of this, it's going to be a lot easier. So now that we've got this screen up, again, we're going to organize our grid views. So find vendor in your grid view, drag it, drop it. And then the next one I want you to find is name, which should have been right next to it, drag it, drop it. And when you're all good, click on unsave grid view and click save grid view. You can see I have mine right there, and that's what I called it. You can call it whatever you'd like. But go ahead and click Save Grid View and name it now. Now what this is doing is it's showing us what vendors have been hitting UAC. And if we expand it, we can actually see what software from that vendor has been hitting UAC. And then, of course, which computers and users have been hitting UAC, trying to either elevate, install, update, whatever the case might be, that particular software or process in Windows. Now, when we get these list of events, we're going to sort this. If you click on the little button up here, you can sort the events out. So what I want to do now is I want to build some rules. So you're going to look at these groups and go, okay, this software, what is it? What does it do? And do I want to make a rule for it? Okay, and then if you decide you want to make a rule, you can select it, action, convert to rule. We're going to do that in just a minute. We're going to make one more view that I think is going to be important, okay? So the view that I want to create is something that relates to publishers. So when you're doing approvals, a lot of times instead of doing something based on the file hash, which is how a lot of approvals do tend to get done, and is the basis for how we identify legitimate files from bad files out there on the internet. So when we're making a rule, not only do we want to know the vendor, but we also might want to know, is this software digitally signed? And if so, how many digital signatures do we have? And so it's a really cool way to see that. So we're going to use our vendor name view that you have created, but we're going to add one more column header to it. So if we scroll off to our right, find publisher thumb, grab it, drag it up here, go ahead and put it right there. Put it right in the middle of those two. Once you get that, come over here, unsave grid view, and save grid view, and I've called this one this right here. Again, you name it whatever you want, call it publisher, it doesn't matter. But go ahead and save your grid view and name it. Now what that shows us is how many digital certificates are in our environment from each vendor. So Core Software Solutions, they're not digitally signed. That's not good, right? Microsoft, they got some stuff that's not signed and some stuff that is signed. And then if we go down here and look at Oracle, we've got 2 digital thumbprints from this particular vendor. So the software is signed under 2 different certificates. Could be old, could be new. And then, over here, we've just got 1 thumbprint. This software is signed. So if we want to make a rule out of something, all we have to do is find an event from either the vendor or the thumbprint that we're working on, and then go ahead and select that event. And when you do that, you see right up there, it's turned to action, right? So go ahead, select one event, and then action, convert to rule. So the very top of the screen is the UAC event info. So this is what was sent to Windows. And what we have to decide now is, for this particular event, am I going to basically give the admin token to this particular process, right? Now, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that process is actually legitimate. So what we can do is we can go down here. You can see we've already pre-selected the file hash. Anytime AutoElevate makes a quick rule, that rule will always be based on the file hash. We take the most restrictive and least privileged way we can do it. So it's always going to be based on the file hash when we create the rule. A lot of times, though, that may not be what you want. And so I'm going to show you some variations on what is the best way to create some basic rules. But first, let's make sure that this is legitimate. So I'm going to click this link. It's going to take us to VirusTotal. And then I can validate with the community that this is actually the Notepad++ installer and it's legitimate, right? So I want to make sure that there's no red X's out here. Nobody says this is malicious or malware, it's been tampered with or anything like that. And in some cases, this is a really good tool and utility to help you know if you don't understand like what the program is that's asking for elevation, like it's just got a bunch of random letters or characters in it, .exe or .msi, you're like, I don't know what that is. So this VirusTotals is, sort of a community aggregation of all these hashes and if they've scanned them and what their results were. Not everything will be out there, but a good chunk of software will be. So now that I know, I feel good, this software is okay. And the way I look at it, as long as I'm not letting bad files and the files I'm letting in are valid, and they're not corrupted, they haven't been compromised in any way, if you don't let bad things in, usually bad things won't happen. So it's like this file's not going to go run some PowerShell and encrypt my drive because it's not a compromised file. So it's going to do what it says it's going to do, which is install Notepad. Now I just have to decide how do I want to do that. So I want you to think of the left side of this screen as an if statement and the right side as a then statement. And so on the left side, we're just going to pick some criteria and decide What fields do I want to use to match up to the UAC event to allow this either approval or denial to happen? In my case, I'm going to do some approvals. I think this one's going to be okay for all of my companies. So now I just have to decide how to do that. In many cases, this is a way that you could do it is the way that we have it set up right now, which is file hash, right? That's the most restrictive. So this rule would basically say, if the file hash is this big long number here, then I will approve admin elevation and apply that to all companies. So anybody, anywhere, at any computer that's under management for you that you have an agent on, then this would elevate this particular installer and it would install no problem. But it would be only for this particular file, right? So this would be the most restrictive way. Now, let's just use this as an example. Let's say we want to open the scope of our approval a little bit more. So in this case, I might do something a little different where I might want to allow a particular vendor. Now, this is a good example for like for Intuit, for QuickBooks. I might want to let just anything from QuickBooks or from Intuit run. They just really do tax and accounting software for the most part. So tax manager, QuickBooks, whatever it is, I don't really care. I want to just allow the vendor. So if they need to update it, they can update it. If they need to install it, they can install it, right? And again, this is all just up to you, how you feel about your acceptable level of risk and things like that. So from here, I'm just going to look at the publisher and say, sure, if it's Notepad++, and it's verified with maybe this certificate hash. I like using hashes on certificates a lot, or thumbprints on the certificates. It's harder to mimic. Whereas subject elements is a little bit easier to do. However, when's a situation where I would use cert hashes, and when's a situation where I would use subject elements? If I only had maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 certificates for a vendor, then I might go ahead and make a rule for each thumbprint. If I have a lot of certificates for a vendor, like AnyDesk, Autodesk, then I might decide to use the subject elements and find the common elements between all of the certificates and use those as my matching criteria. So if I had like 6 Notepad++ digital certificates, then I might just use these instead. But seeing as I only have 1, and I'm cool with that, I'm going to go for the hash route. Okay, so now the rule says if it is Notepad++, under this thumbprint, approve admin elevation for all companies. Now let's say that Notepad++ has a lot of software like Microsoft. Now in this case, if this said Microsoft here, I would not make this kind of rule. There's way too many things that are available that could potentially be damaging and that would elevate, and I don't want to do that. So what you want to do then is leverage some of your file attributes to limit the scope of your approval. All right, so this is allowing a vendor. Now we're going to go up here to the file attributes and we're going to add some additional criteria. These are always going to be and, never or. So if I do this, for example, and I leverage product name, now I could say if the product is Notepad++, so if these folks had other products, only this product would be allowed to elevate. So if it's this product and this publisher with this thumbprint, then approve an admin elevation for all companies. Now let's look at another scenario. Let's say in doing that, when we're allowing something like this, that would allow both anything to install from that vendor or anything to elevate from that vendor. And this is good for things like Intuit for QuickBooks, right? If you think of the process and what needs to happen, I might need to install QuickBooks, but I also might need to elevate QuickBooks because it does a lot of updates. So in this scenario, this kind of a rule would be very good. I'm allowing you to install it. I'm also allowing you to update it and run it in an elevated state. However, Notepad++, that would not be a good idea for this particular program because this program can open other programs. And the way UAC works is if I give this program elevated rights, it can open other programs which will then give it elevated rights to those programs as the parent process. So in this scenario, I might want to limit this to either file hash, or I might want to limit it to additional criteria like adding a file name. In a lot of instances in software, the installer name of the program is different than the actual program when it runs after it's installed. So in the case of this program, Notepad++ is just notepad++.exe. That's the program that runs after you install it. But here, this is the installer file. Now, if I just leave it the way it is, I would be relegated to just this version of Notepad++. But I don't necessarily want to do that. I don't really care what version they need. And I just don't want them to elevate the program after it's installed. So we're going to leverage some wildcards. All right. So I'm going to take this section of the install name out since I'm pretty familiar with their naming conventions. I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to get rid of this too. Okay. We're just going to put a star there. So now what our rule says, if the product is Notepad++ and the file name contains npp and installer.exe in this order, in this way, if it contains these characters in this order, and it's published by the vendor under this thumbprint, then I will approve an admin elevation and apply that to, again, whatever level you want to apply it to. So fundamentally, there's 3 or 4 different ways to look at how you might do a rule. You could do something based on the file hash, be very restrictive, be limited to that file only. That's okay. You could do something based on just the publisher, allow whatever from that vendor, and it can elevate, it can install, don't really care. Or we can start to get more restrictive and really control exactly what people are doing. So in this case, then I'm adding some additional criteria. Hey, as long as the product matches or the file name or some part of it matches the way that I want, then I will allow certain things to happen. Like in this case, only the installer can elevate, but the program itself cannot. And using product name in conjunction with publisher is very good for Microsoft because they're very good at filling out the product name stuff. So that way, you're not just blanket approving Microsoft or any other large vendor. So Adobe, HP, Dell, Intel, Microsoft, all those folks. You want to try to leverage some file attributes with some publisher stuff, and then you can curtail a little bit of your approvals. 2 things to be wary of over here is 1, your elevation type, admin versus user. I talked about this with the technician mode stuff. It's just context, right? So 9 times out of 10, admin works fine for most things. We do this all the time when we log in and we put our password in. User sometimes, map drives, or the application specific. Revit, it's a good example, user elevation. Otherwise, admin usually works fine. Your level, you can create rules that potentially conflict. So it is important to understand what it will take precedence. A computer rule can override a location rule. That can override a company, and that can override your global settings. So I could make this rule and say Notepad++ is approved for all companies. But let's say that one of my companies says, nope, don't want you to do that. No problem. Then I can come back and say, all right, for this particular company, then I will deny it. And the system will follow that logic. Approved for all companies, denied for this company. So you can nest those rules if you need to. Once you're done, I do highly recommend that you use the friendly name option, and I recommend that you come up with a naming convention that works best for you. Whatever that is. I like to do things like this. Approve, because it tells me I approved it, but it's also, I know it's an approval rule. In this case, it's like Notepad ++ install, right? Install only. And it's under a publisher cert. And again, you can get as crazy or as easy as you want. And I think this one's till 2025. All right. And you can see the cert details simply by expanding right there. And this one is in fact good till 2025. So now anybody looking at this rule knows exactly what the rule does without having to open it. And when you're making quick rules with AutoElevate, this isn't filled out by us. So this is going to be blank. So if you see rules that have been made that are blank with no friendly name, that's a sort of a notification to you that you should go review that rule. Make sure it's configured the way that you want it to be configured, like we showed you here, and it does what you want it to do. And then once you're happy with it, put in a friendly name, and then you know that rule is good. You can let it go, and I don't have to deal with it again. And that is how you create rules. And fundamentally, that's the most important part of the system, is really just getting that rules part down, and just creating those from various events that you see in here. Anything that you need to test with, so if you're doing any testing, then no problem, right click on it, run it as admin, it'll bring the event in, and then you can go ahead and make a rule out of it, and it just takes a couple of minutes. All right, so the only thing left to really do then, once you've got a rule in place and your agent's deployed, you got some events, you got a rule in place, is really just to change the agent into live mode so that you can test it out and make sure it does what you want it to do in the way that you want it to do it. So you can go ahead and set this to live, and then when the agent checks in, it will switch itself over to live mode from audit mode. Now, you can always cheat a little bit if you want to. The agents, like I said before, they're sleeping for about 5 minutes and then they'll check in. But if I'm in a little bit of a rush, no big deal. You can always right click on something and say run as admin and then click cancel. When UAC comes up, it'll force the agent to wake up and it'll force it to check in. And that way you can, have things move along a little bit quickly when you're doing your testing. Otherwise, throughout the course of the day, the normal 5-minute check-in window will be fine. They'll check in, they'll update their rules, they'll get any new pending commands you have, and then they'll go ahead and do those things for you. But otherwise, those are all the key settings and all the first steps, things that you can do to get started with AutoElevate and get started with testing and validating and making sure that this is all set up the way that you want it. Feel free to reach out with us, and if you have any questions, we're here to help. Thanks so much.